So I want to just say that the exhaustion, the frustration, the anger, and the demoralization of many education workers means that it's important for me to make the case for why you should expend the time now considering the ideas in my book. The main idea that I hope you take away from this session and share with your colleagues and comrades is that the new normal in schools that you face is going to continue and is going to worsen unless we understand its origins and its aims. These conditions have been planned, promoted, and organized by powerful, wealthy elites to increase their profits and control over education and society in ways we never imagined. And of course, to accomplish their aims, they have to weaken those who defend the right of all kids to have educational experiences that will help them reach their full human potential and the right to shape the future. And that last part, the right to shape the future, I think is key here because that's what's at stake. I think that's clear when you read pages 1, 2, and 3 of the report by Williamson and Hogan that's cited in my second endnote in chapter 1 about the global education industry. These guys, and it is still mainly guys, although, you know, they're making themselves diverse too. They mean business. The pandemic has been an opportunity to accelerate and intensify their project of using information technology to transform all of work, and that includes teaching. And I want to say that when the pandemic is tamed, as it will be eventually, the changes made in our working conditions and the shift to remote learning, including longer hours, more use of platforms to regulate and control what is taught and how, greater surveillance of students and teachers, as well as mass privatization through private-public partnerships, is not only going to persist, it's going to expand. I just want to end with one note that I mentioned before the session began when the panelists and I were together, is that you know, one of the problems that we have in doing research about this is not only that they have billions of dollars to pay people to do research. And, you know, here I am in my kitchen and study, right? Right? You're in your living rooms, or you're in your homes, right? That's who we face. But I read this really interesting research about the delivery apps, those food delivery apps, you know. So a long debate in education has been whether education is a service we deliver like this, right? You hand it over to somebody, or whether it's a human transaction, right? Is education like a pizza that you order that's delivered, or is it something different? And that is the critical question that we're facing right now. That is the challenge. Because one of the aims of Silicon Valley and Wall Street is to use platforms just like they use for Uber Eats and DoorDash, right? Think about that, to control our work. And they are well on the way to doing that. They are well on the way to doing that. So there's this divide between curriculum, which we no longer set, right? Those curriculum standards we don't determine them anymore. When I began teaching, we had a voice in setting those curriculum standards. Now they're tied to the standardized tests and standards that are supposedly needed for the United States to be an economic, you know, a world economic power, right? So curriculum has been divorced from delivering instruction. So this is the thing that we should realize. We don't even have a say in whether we're getting pizza or ramen, right? Or what we're getting from the delivery app. They've controlled that already with standards, right? We've lost that with standardized testing. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to regain that control over what is taught, and we have to stop them from altering the way we deliver instruction. And that's the challenge. That's what I talk about in my second, but part of what I talk about in my second, in the chapter. I'm going to end here because I think that the event has been organized to enact what good teachers recognize as student-centered learning, right? We learn from and with one another. The time to think about the future our society needs and deserves is now, even though we don't have the energy, right, to think about these big questions. I get it, but we have to do it now because we are already very late coming to fight this project, and we have no time to spare.
Thank you so much, Lois. And yes, so Lois is speaking to us regarding this new book that's coming out, building on her former book, The Future of Our Schools. Right. And thank you so much to everyone here in this roundtable. I want to take a moment to give our panelists or prepared panelists just a minute to introduce yourselves so that people know who you are and know, like, are familiar with like the work, the awesome work that we do. And if it's okay, if I can start with Aaron.
Hi, and thank you, Lois, and everyone for allowing us to have the space and join you in conversation and action today. My name is Aaron Binge. He, him pronouns. I teach 6th, 7th, 8th grade at Brentano in Logan Square, Chicago. And I'm also engaged in the CTU testing committee as their chair.
Thank you, Aaron. We're happy to have you here. Nina?
Hi, Nina Hike. I'm a chemistry teacher at George Westinghouse College Prep, also a core member, also a member of the CTU Human Rights Committee. And my work has been just that, looking at, pushing back against curriculum that I don't feel serves the students that I teach, and trying to develop other curriculums that helps my students to become transformative intellectuals, that they can use the information that they learn to transform their communities.
Definitely. Thank you, Nina. And Noe.
Yeah, Noe Serrano. I'm a social science teacher over at Back of the Yards. I was invited here by Mr. Potter Jackson. So very excited to be here. Yeah.
Excited to have you here. What a time to enter this profession. And I'm Norma Noriega, teacher on the Southwest side at a sustainable community school, actually. And I will be your MC today. I do want to move us into this next part where we, want to have this conversation about, and I want to give our panelists a moment to uplift their voice about these happenings that Lois had referenced. Like we are late. There have been various systems that have been working throughout the pandemic to ensure that they can creep into any cracks that have opened up as a result of COVID. We have a lot of public and private partnerships now. Some of the things that Lois had mentioned briefly before we started brought to mind things that I am seeing coming into the school. So I want to give about 5-ish minutes for our panelists, and just your general thoughts when you initially when we're initially learning of like, hey, we're kind of late to this to this neoliberal like privatization types of stuff 2.0, right? Because we've seen this happen before and it's happening again with COVID, like bringing in these points that were left open, left vulnerable, and now we have a variety of creeping neoliberal hands in here. And I'm even seeing in the chat, like Aaron Lynch is mentioning Skyline, which is, you know, that's like CPS's own in-house way of, and I see Aaron smiling because I know he's looked at it, like that's CPS's in-house way of putting their finger in the pot when it comes to curriculum making, because I know we know that they don't want to spend money on curriculum if they don't have to, and they would rather keep that money within CPS. So like, let's just like call it what it is. If anyone wants to jump in or start first, Aaron, Nina, Noe.
I think you had me first on the email, so I'll kick it off here. And love the kind of nice segue by saying Skyline. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah. So, anyways, I work on the CTU testing committee, and this first chapter just rang a lot of truth for me and gave me kind of a new, sense of purpose and affirmation. So, thank you, Lois, for your work. I think you beautifully web these ideas of the ruling class's incessant need for data and the synchronization of public education with capitalism, and how, in the end, it's powerful elites wanting to determine our future. We work in a school district in Chicago where testing weighs very, very heavy. It dictates curriculum, learning opportunities for students, their learning identities, our success or failure as teachers, whether or not schools should even stay open in Chicago. We make special ed, services determinations based on standardized tests. It has really become a central part of a teacher's life every day. One of the members of my committee and just another wonderful core member on the steering committee, Paula Barajas, calculate all the tests that CPS students have to endure in the elementary experience. So out of 178 days of instruction per year, in 2018, an 8th grader would have experienced about 18 days of testing per year. If you're an English learner, you'd be experiencing 22 days of testing per year. And if you have an IEP, that would go up to 24 plus days a year. So just significant amounts of time and resources put into testing in Chicago. That leaves students graduating in 8th grade with having taken 150 to 200 standardized tests. And on top of that, we do the extra cruel step in Chicago where we give 8th graders a high school admissions test, and we use that test to sort them into high schools that have widely different resources available and opportunities. And it's just being a middle school teacher, it's just like, as Dr. Love says, it's spirit murdering every year that we have to kind of endure and witness and, facilitate. The line in your chapter where you said no student is too young or too old for education to be data driven, with metrics for teaching and learning decided as far from classrooms. I think that one really hit hard for me. We've been convinced that all we need as teachers is these massive amounts of spreadsheets of color-coded, like norm referenced data displays of students' abilities on these really discrete surface level skills. That's particularly true with having the NWA MAP test, which massive amount of school districts use in Illinois. CPS just stopped using. Just last year, CPS spent $135 million on to create a centralized, standardized K through 12 curriculum. That was Skyline, and as well, they have accompanying curriculum assessments in Checkpoint that were being used. And if anyone's engaged with this new district online curriculum, it's incredibly clunky, incredibly unusable, and no more culturally relevant than any other standardized curriculum we've been given in the past. And you know, when talking to people and teaching learning about it, it's like, why is CPS doing this? Because it's clearly not being well received. And the reason why they have this virtual online universal curriculum is for click data. They want click data on teachers to dictate what we're doing. I mean, it's just a step away from autonomy in our classrooms even more. And you know, in this moment in a pandemic, for us to be spending money on that is scary. It's scary, to say the least. And you know, we spend all this money, and yet this is the first year where my students have a counselor and a social worker and a nurse in my entire career, you know, 10-year career in Chicago. And that's because, and that's no way because of the ruling class, by the way, it's because our union fought for those things, and we have those things. In the middle of the pandemic, the Northwestern Evaluation Association published a study using their own assessment suite about the COVID slide. And it rang a bunch of alarms about the crisis of learning loss. They ended up making recommendations for, you guessed it, more testing using their systems. And I just think, you know, the conventional critique of standardized testing is that it wastes time and stresses out students, which it does. But I think we missed the larger point, and I think you raised that in your article, that it's really about shaping what we value in our students, and you know, predicting their futures based on these tests. You know, I've taught for 10 years in CPS, and I do not know of a world where elementary students weren't taking tests in the fall, winter, and spring, high stakes tests. And you know, it is the curriculum, right? If you don't have the data, you're not a good teacher.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I'm sorry, Erin, but I also want to give space to Nina and Noe. But you brought up like excellent points. I see people bringing things up in the chat, like just also like, you know, how did Follett or how did Aspen just get so much weight into CPS, because Aspen is from Follett, which has a contract with CPS. I'm thinking of the standardized test makers that have the contracts and are moving to computer-based. It's a lot. It's definitely a lot. Nina, Noe, like if you have like further thoughts, like some of the things that come to mind is just like, y'all remember at the beginning of the pandemic when everything was like reimagine how we can do education and the opportunities that this will provide to do things differently and and now like it's a little like nerve inducing knowing that we're like we missed like kind of like seeing it, and that it's happening now and we can see it, but at the same time it's also fuel for the fight. Noe and Nina.
So I would say that, you know, for me, I don't really feel like I missed anything. I've been watching closely about what's going on in terms of the backlash to the Black Lives Matter movement, and, you know, with the whole critical race theory, and in Illinois, they call it the Curriculum Transparency Bill, where, you know, racism or race is something that, you know, shouldn't be taught in schools. And so I've been really thinking about the historic significance of all of the things that have been taking place, and where, you know, my awakening of thinking, how is all this stuff connected? And if we did know the history of it, like Miss Weiner, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, talks
It's
about.
Lois, just call me Lois.
Just call you Lois. Okay. That Lois talked about that, you know, if we look at the historic situation, then we can begin to see the big picture. And so I feel like in terms of, because I can speak from a science lens, you know, I was, you know, in that traditional science silo for a long, long time. And so then, you know, once the pandemic happened, and I also saw the video of George Floyd, it kind of shook me in saying that, you know, how am I teaching science to my students, and what, you know, what are they going to need from me as a teacher to be able to understand how racism, you know, impacts their education. And so I think that historically, also during the pandemic, they imploded the Crawford power plant, and then they also did the General Iron move. And so those things kind of put, me on the path to being able to kind of connect historically about environmental racism and how that is also something that is being pushed heavily, in Chicago. And so I would say that in terms of curriculum and being able to push for the curriculum that students deserve in Chicago public schools, it's the curriculum, just looking at Chicago history and bringing forth what's happened in Chicago to Black and Brown youth and people and what they also experience during the pandemic. You can come from a COVID-19 standpoint and the biology of all of it, the segregation, the treatment. And I feel like all of those things, if you connect, a lot of people are like, well, what's wrong? Why do Black people have such an issue with, getting a vaccine? Or what's going on? Why is it low vaccination rates? But if you connect it to historic treatment of Blacks in medicine, then that's significant. And that's where the hesitancy is and where vaccine education is needed. And so I feel like a lot of times, a lot of things are all disconnected. And I think that's a part of neoliberalism where they disconnect everything into these individual fights. And so you're fighting over here, then they're popping up over there in some other area. And so I feel like in terms of education in Chicago, that if teachers and people that develop curriculum start to really look at and want to really teach students how to transform their communities, that, looking at the historic connections between environmental racism from the Toxic Donut in Algier Gardens to General Iron's move from up north to the south east side, all the way to Little Village with the Crawford Power Plant fight, and also with payroll currently fighting against Sims, scrap metal in their neighborhood. So I think all of those things are connected, and that's the kind of stuff that I would like to see taught in Chicago public schools.
Thank you, Nina. And y'all, Nina's out here doing the work. Like, she saw this and she knew that now more than ever is the time to be teaching, like #TeachTruth, like teaching these histories, these things that we don't normally talk about in the classroom, and going the opposite direction of what this big neoliberal privatization, personalized online learning, all those buzzwords, like Nina's seeing that and going the other way because she knows what her students need, what our communities need. Noe, if you want to take a moment to uplift your voice, there's a lot, y'all. I dropped the link for the first chapter of the book, and again, if you're looking for any inspiration in this moment, please read it. Feel free to jump in, Noe.
Yeah, well, admittedly, I was rather ignorant on a lot of these topics, I would say. I was unaware of just the extent of how, private interests have seemed to work their way into the public education system. I guess growing up and going through the CPS system, I was, it was there in the sense that I saw how, charter schools were propping up. And when I learned about how charter schools, in essence, suck money away from public schools and, are essentially hitting enrollment for CPS schools as well, I thought, well, that's kind of screwed up. But again, I didn't think too much of it. That's sort of as deep as the analysis went there. But when I was reading through the commercialization and privatization little booklet, I guess you can call it, from issue.com website, just reading, like flipping through those first 3 pages, I think what really stuck out to me and is, I guess, making me think on where public education goes from here is how, it talks about how certain platforms such as YouTube and TikTok are are seeking ways to increase their presence in education, right? And so you already have things like Khan Academy, and you have certain TikTok content creators, I guess you can call them, who have made a following, have created a following based off their ability to sort of communicate and teach others. So I think it's really interesting to see, and I say interesting in not like, oh, this is great. I mean that more in the sense of like, where are we going from here, right? But it's definitely very interesting to see where public education is going to be heading, especially being like a first year teacher. You know, again, my reference point isn't as I guess just, I don't have that wide range of a
No, yeah, no
perspective,
worries.
but
But,
yeah.
like, I can't even imagine what it's been like in this time, like entering teaching, like, because this is all you've ever known. But I don't know about you, but I always have teachers. I'm 6 years in, but I always have teachers telling me it wasn't always like this. Like that phrase comes up so much.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it.
No, thank you, Noah. Like y'all, like this time, like I personally can't imagine jumping into teaching during this time. Just the way that like the pandemic has, like, I don't want to call it a distraction because it's so much more than that, right? This is a global pandemic, but it privatizers, companies, all these groups that partake in these neoliberal practices that are ready to like rev it up and get the machine going again. Like they did not snooze on the opportunity to put their systems and infrastructures in place so that, you know, this can be a thing, right? Like I am thinking of how, at least in elementary schools and CPS, we were given branching minds this year, and it's like a centralized system for student behavior incidents, for family contacts, for intervention, even though we already have Aspen for that, but it's like this free contract thing that CPS is offering from a third party. It is their private like tech infrastructure in a public education institution, right? And Lois, just as you're hearing this from our, you know, from the people in the school, it's like, what, you know, what comes to mind, or what are your first?
I would like to hear from more people. I'm
Okay.
learning a lot. Let's open it up and I'll just have the last. I want to hear
for
from other
sure.
people. I'm learning so much.
Yeah, like this room is filled with people in the building. So y'all will be using a progressive stack. So please feel free to drop stack in the chat. That will, it just makes it easier to just go down the chat and see who's coming up next, and we'll be following the progressive stack. So just keep in mind, in this time for like uplifting voices to like step forward, or if you need to step back. But y'all drop stack in the chat if you want to speak to any of this. I saw as people were speaking, like I was seeing, you know, people are, we see this, we notice this. I know Erin was speaking to the arts. In chapter 2, Lois is going to be looking at SEL, which I know has been big in CPS, supposedly. So you can just type stack into the chat, and then I'll be calling on the stack in a progressive order if you want to jump in. But y'all, please talk to us. You're there, you're in the schools, you see it. Take a moment. Yes, in the chat, if you want to introduce yourself. I'm excited to hear from y'all. Jackson?
I'll make it quick. It's not nearly as profound or thoughtful as, you know, Lois, Erin, Noe, or Nina, or yourself, Norma, what you've shared. But just noticing in like my own school, we had a lot of latitude for being compassionate during the pandemic and remote teaching, and we're told by administration, you know, we shouldn't be grading harshly, we should be centering SEL, we should be building relationships and not using grades like a cudgel, and that it was good that we weren't focusing on the SAT. And suddenly all of that's out the window. Like the kind of punitive grading system is back in full force. We're doing all this SAT prep. the state itself is not, reducing the necessity of that for students. While, we've had some legislative victories recently around some of the elementary level or pre-K level tests, that's not, matriculating upwards. So just wanted to support what everybody's been saying. And I think it doesn't just express itself in terms of the actual policies of the district or the laws of the state or the nation. It also becomes embedded in our behavior towards one another, the school culture, that we occupy our own kind of mentality and approach to pedagogy. So just think that there's ways in which this stuff becomes the air we breathe.
Thank you, Jackson. Michelle?
Hi, everybody. Thanks again, Lois, for bringing us an issue and research that we use in core to wrap our minds around. It's who we are. We're not just a bunch of people wanting to get elected. We're people who do this work day in and day out in our classrooms. And so having said that, Norma, you said something so profound to me, like some of us don't remember what classes felt like, where there was play and interaction and group work and project-based learning. And so one of the things I'd like to have all of us put in our head is that we're the ones who should be having student teachers. I took a student teacher every semester because I wanted to make sure there were first grade teachers out there who still let children play. And so just let's put that in our minds as something after we are through this next big surge in core, that we promote what it's like to have student teachers inside our classrooms. And once again, thank you, Lois. Really appreciate you.
Definitely, Michelle, for sure. I would not be the same teacher I am today if it wasn't for my mentor teacher. Thank you. Jesse?
Hey everyone, sorry for being off camera. Not getting exercise. Thanks to Lois. Yep.
Jesse, I'm so sorry. It's really windy. If you can cover wherever your mic is, you can cover it with your hand or something. Thank you.
Is that better?
A lot better. Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'll be brief. First of all, thank you, Lois, for having been a critical friend all these years. I really appreciate that you're a person who just say truth and mean it as a friendly gesture. And sometimes it's an argument, but it's always important and critical. And then thanks to the panel and Norma as well. Just something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I want to throw it in the mix. One of the ironies of the pandemic has been that it's the boss that's been fighting for in-person instruction, and we've been making demands about remote instruction. Whereas, call me an old Marxist, but the history of our movement is that workers have power when we control the point of production, and the point of production is our schools. And I just think there's going to be really difficult ramifications. And think about trying to strike remote work and what that means. And so I was just hoping that maybe people could think a little bit about remoteness as a factor in this, and how we are able to do some education with our coworkers about the potential drawbacks for being able to have people who are nowhere near the physical site of a school be able to log on and deliver instruction. Thanks.
Thank you, Jesse. And I was just typing, but I'll just say it. But definitely it speaks to what Lois wrote in the first chapter regarding labor unions and how, when faced with this imperative of go back to the classroom when it's not safe or fight for remote, that is a fight that we took on for our immunocompromised students, staff, family members. Claudia?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Claudia Moreno. I'm a special education bilingual teacher, preschool this year at Lloyd Elementary in Belmont Cragen. And I just want to thank Lois again for being an ally to CORE, to CTU, to public education. I really do admire all of your work and research. I just wanted to share my experience because this is the first year I was put into preschool. So I was learning a lot and put into a situation a week before school opened, sorry, I'm recovering from COVID, so I sound very hoarse and I'm recovering at home, FYI. So if I sound a little hoarse, it's because I'm recovering. I tested positive on Tuesday. And thank God for tests, that we have those tests. You know, we fought for that. We fought to have tests in our schools. And had I not had access to that test, I would have not known that I was sick and spreading it to my family and whatnot. So we've done so much as CORE. So I'm really, really proud to be part of this union and be part of this fight. And but anyway, I wanted to share about my experience in preschool, where I feel like, you know, even in kindergarten, you know, these kids in kindergarten are not allowed to play. And I'm echoing from Michelle. Preschool, we are allowed to play, which is great. And I'm so happy that we're allowed that time, large motor. However, they've been putting in this iStation requirement for preschool, and it's on an iPad, and the kids hate it. As an educator, I hate it. These kids are not even engaged when they're on there. Even the platform is so difficult for the kids to even get into and everything like that. So that's just one of the things I was thinking about, like these tech companies and these programs that CPS is investing in, you know, millions of dollars without even our input. But I think what's important is that we have our PPLCs, and these are things that we need to bring and just be bold about. Like, we need to have a voice and with our PPLCs, so we have a voice, teachers have a voice. We want to implement this Skyline. I've asked my teachers at school, they hate it. They do not like it. The only one that likes it is the one that's teaching science. But for most of the colleagues I've spoke to in the upper grades, they don't like Skyline. It's, you know, it's a lot of copies, and they're not happy with it. And it was brought to us by the principal saying it's going to be free this year. We can decide whether we want to adopt this program or not. But that's just an example, though, from preschool. Like, they're trying to bring this technology into babies, and babies need to, you know, our babies need to nap, which we won in the contract. Thank you. Our babies get to nap now in preschool. And I guess being forced into preschool, now going back, being forced into preschool, which I did not want, really opened my eyes to, like, oh my God, we won so many great things for preschool. So we just really need to echo that all over the city. But anyway, I digress. I just wanted to share my experience with that. And then Aspen, another one that I brought up in the comments, is the way we put in grades and student information, and the way it was just brought to us, like, just slammed in our faces. No time to process, no time to vote for it or say we want this. But it's not really user friendly. I don't know how my core brothers and sisters, what they think of it, but that's my input. I don't like it at all. But anyway, thank you again, Lois. I just wanted to share that, being a teacher, you know, being on the front lines, and we have to continue to fight for public education, because the way Uber is trying to take over everything, they're trying to take over you know, how they deliver food, like you said. And you know, my dad was a cab driver back in the 80s and 90s. You know, we didn't have Uber, thank God. It didn't exist. He was able to earn a living wage from being a cabbie, you know, for us and things. It's like, now, like, they're taking over. You know, people don't have those same opportunities anymore, and they don't see it till later on. So it's just really, capitalism is just really trying to take over and just, you know, just separate the classes. You know, we're losing our middle class. So, but there's just so many issues that come with this. But thank you so much for letting me share. Thank you.
No,
All right.
thank you, and sending well wishes and lots of healing thoughts. Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Hello. We're in roundish table right now. If people want to drop their name, what building they're at, what school they're at, in the chat, pronouns as well. The stack is open. I do want to take a moment to just uplift some comments that I saw in the chat. I had noted Edwin spoke to the SEL, how CPS has been approaching with SEL, but now we're returning to punitive measures, or like those, making sure we write out the incident reports, or just even, I don't know how y'all have been at your school, but we've had SEL curriculum developers reach out, trying to swoop in and get schools to purchase curriculum. And I see, Lois. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. But feel free to drop your name in the chat. We are using a progressive stack. I believe the stack right now is open. I don't see anyone in the stack right now. And then progressive stack, just making sure that like if we have multiple people on the stack, it'll be Black and brown women first to the front, and then everyone following. That's the progressive stack. Y'all just have me thinking about a lot right now. Please jump in because I know y'all are thinking about a lot right now too. Nina?
Yeah, when someone's talked about like the school culture and SEL, and it's like what do people think, you know, Black and brown students need in that area of support, and just having, you know, a teacher to understand and the school to understand when they're sick. You know, some students when they were sick, you know, it was like a big push between like, or if the student tells you they're sick, but then they don't tell the school they're sick, then you can't open the Google Meet, you know, just all this back and forth. And it's like, why can't we just provide that robust education for students when they need it? And why do we have to go through all this red tape to like provide them with an education? And then in terms of like SEL for students, like Jackson said, there were, I don't know what that was. Anybody see that?
I stopped the video, so, and then I think.
Oh,
Please stop. Not the video, you stop.
I'm the only one hearing stuff. I mean, I'm sorry. That's why I stopped talking.
Yeah, we were just getting spammed. You're good.
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm like, something's happening. Yeah, and I was just saying, just like Jackson said, it seems like last year everybody was like, you know, care for the students, you know, CPS was like, you know, help them and all of that. Now it's just back to normal, like get this SAT out, what you doing to do SAT. And I just think it's really sad that the opportunity wasn't used to like really reimagine what education can be like in Chicago. So.
No, thank you, Nina. Like, but like you're right. Lois, when I was reading the first chapter of the book, I was just thinking about how perfect it would be in curriculum circles, which is something, an endeavor that we're doing as a sustainable community school, in which we're basically outlining units alongside, right now it's mostly students, but the intent is students, community members, and parents. So kind of like, you know, like I'm trying to move in the same direction that Nina's moving into. And I'm like, this first chapter, just this article, like really just lays out like the first 3 sessions that we had was just talking about stuff like this, and like how perfect like this article would be for like future curriculum circles to like get us in that headspace. Y'all, I've dropped a link in the chat. I can drop it again, but there's a lot. We have another more big fights in front of us. I see, the stack is currently open. Lois, please feel free to jump in. I see a list. I do see like Elizabeth, Dr. Elizabeth Triplett noting like Black and brown families, we need housing security, equitable pay on jobs, good healthcare, investment in communities, and good city services. And I have Erin on staff.
Yes, hi, Erin Lynch. Excuse me. Visual arts teacher and also special education teacher. And I just really appreciate this conversation because I think you see all the intersections here, the way that testing has been pushed for so long, and that's been something pushed even in our teacher pre-service programs, that it's so necessary that we need this, you know, golden data, because that's the only way you can group children or differentiate your instruction, and taking away our autonomy on something that we have master's degrees, doctorate degrees, have studied so long in our craft, and giving that up, that power up to these ed tech companies. as frightening, but I think it's been this slow, long, slithery snake sneaking in, and it becomes the norm that we're so comfortable and used to. I'm really concerned, as in our arts committee, one of our big pushes is that CPS, champions itself, with Chance the Rapper and Yo-Yo Ma comes to a school and it's wonderful. But there's not an arts teacher in every single school. And in 2012, we lost like 140 arts teachers. And then Rahm Emanuel went on the news and it was so great. We were hiring with these TIF money, 80 new positions in the arts and PE. And it's like, well, we're not even like making up for the firings that you've already done. So one of our pushes is that we want to have an arts teacher in every school. And what was really disturbing is hearing the Department of Arts, and the Department of Arts I don't view as like bad guys at all, but they firmly like believe, and it's sad that they like really believe this is the solution, that having Skyline and having a quote unquote equity curriculum is going to be the way to support students, not having someone who looks like you, something that Nina's been speaking about so much here, having someone who actually understands the lived experience of our students, and creating a curriculum that, yes, teaches all these standards, but also is pertinent to our students' lived experience and pertinent to their interest and is student-centered. So hearing that, CPS is putting out a bid right now for their Skyline for ed tech companies to come in on their arts programming is really scary when they say, oh, it's just going to be optional, but that's what they say right now. And what does that look like in the future? So I appreciate, Lois, you saying like, this is something that we are behind the gun on a little bit. It's been coming, and this pandemic was a perfect opportunity for them to jump on top of things, but we're not too late in speaking out on what is so necessary for our students and our communities.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Erin. I do have Edwin on the stack.
Hey everyone, hola a todos. Can y'all hear me okay? Yeah, ándale. Thank you, and yeah, I mean, much love to CORE and folks, long time supporter and educational activist and former UFT member in New York City. Yeah, I just wanted to, I think I appreciate this conversation and the space and hearing how much harm is being perpetrated in the spirit of, I think the thing I wanted to point to here was how much progress and improvement is situated on what we might think about as like digital kind of racial capitalist kinds of structures, and like all the rhetoric about, basically to me it's like, oh, how is data and digital tools going to save us? When in fact the reality is, and what so many of you here have spoken to, is that in fact it's quite the opposite, right? That it's about profiting, and this is what I think Lois, my good buddy Lois, points to in the first chapter of what is going to be an exciting book, a collection of ideas here, which is that it's profiteering off of harm. And historical intergenerational harm at that. And so I think it was the comment too, I think by Elizabeth Triplett too, around like what Black and Brown families actually need, right? Like all of those things are being, I guess I want us to remain vigilant about how all of those things like housing security, equitable pay, healthcare, investment are all being digitized, with everyone's talk about like smart cities, this, right? Like our health policies and everything is based on like metrics, new metrics around how to measure, how to evaluate, and it really is just kind of cover for a kind of triage approach, right? Where it's like, well, we're actually going to just focus on, this tier of people, and everybody who's kind of foregone, which is of course like our Black and Brown low income folks, they're just going to chop us off, right? And like leave us to die. And so, and this is like what you all are pointing to is really what's happening within the kind of the structures of our schools, which is, again, kind of reframing of racism and capitalism You know, and the last thing I'll say is like that point about social emotional learning. That one that for me hits the hardest because you know, when we look at like BLM and a number of the movements that have arisen over the last few years, the promise and importance of healing within the movements is so vital to sustaining these movements. And what SEL, you know, and I remember just thinking about the promise of SEL and like what it could potentially do. But what it's done is it monetized our trauma, right? Like it monetized the harm. And so you're just making money off of it, and not actually disrupting the systems that have led us to basically being prematurely vulnerable to death. And so I'm like, you know, yeah. So I feel for you all, and like we're struggling with that same thing here in Philly, and just you know continue the fight. So, but I appreciate being able to you know be in this space with y'all.
Thank you so much, Edwin. Thank you for representing Philly. Thank you. I believe the stack is open right now. And then I wanted to uplift a comment that I saw by Nina, in which college and universities are moving away from requiring like these tests. So like, we're not sure why CPS is still pushing it, capitalism, right? Because we know these are like multi-million-dollar like contracts and stuff over the course of many years. Like I think I heard my colleague tell me we're still administering I8R this year. And oh, thank you, Tammy.
Hey, I apologize. I don't know if you guys there was a perceived learning that perception of loss.
You're breaking up a little bit, Tammy.
No, thank you, Tammy. I'm so sorry. Yeah, it's really choppy. I'm sorry. I did hear learning loss, right? I think at this point it's just lag. Incoming audio. But I mean, Tammy did bring up, like I only heard snippets of it, but you know, learning loss, this phrase is being pushed on us a lot as like one of the big drivers for why we need to use, you know, this program or, you know, have this data intact. Like into a sense, like we know as educators, like we know like how we can use this in ways that are helpful. Lois, I'm going to open this up for you to speak to us. You've heard from us. What are your
what are my thoughts?
Yeah.
I learned a lot, and I want to say you're very smart, really. And I think what it shows is that struggle is educative. And when you struggle and you win and you create a better union, that is a new higher point from which to wage the struggle. And that's what this discussion showed me, because you're way ahead of other people. I'm telling you that. I'm laying it out here right now, which is one reason I was so delighted that Jackson organized this, and so that I could talk to you, because I'm looking to you all to be the leadership. Because there are things that I can do as a researcher, but there are other things I can't. I can't translate these ideas that I have into a program for the schools, a program for your contract negotiations. I can't do that. Only you can do that with your members, using the, you know, the process of contract negotiation and contract enforcement and And okay, so one of the things I want to say is that this project actually began in 2008, which is what people started to realize about 10 years later, 6 years later. I want you to think about that. It was in 2008 that this project of platformization really began, because it occurred after the financial crisis and school districts were not buying software as much. Why were they not buying software as much? Because they didn't have the money because of the financial crisis, right? So this process really began in 2008. So when I say we're late to the game, that's what I mean. We're late to the game. Everybody is late to the game in understanding this. Not just you, but researchers as well, right? So the other thing I want to talk about Nina's point about the red tape, because I think that was a very smart example. That red tape about reporting student absences before you can give them the help they need, that's not an accident. It is about systems of control and profit. That's what we have to understand. These are not decisions that are, this is not a mistake. This is not a mistake, an error in the sense of it being somebody not doing their job or CPS being dysfunctional, which it is dysfunctional. But it's dysfunctional because these systems are in place to control you and the students, right? And that control is about political control, social control, and intellectual control. That's what it's about. And it's also about profit. So it's about all of those things. And one of the issues that I talk about in the second chapter is that we use the term neoliberalism because I think for me at least, we didn't think people were ready to hear about capitalism. But this is really about capitalism, and capitalism is a social system. It's not just an economic system, it's a social system, right? And that's something that BLM has made so clear by discussing the way that racism is embedded in capitalism's development, right? So that's the connection in all of this. That's the connective tissue for me, is understanding that capitalism is a social system. The other thing I want to say, and I think that Aaron, the committee may not like to hear this because it's going to require political education. We cannot just get rid of the little tests. We have to get rid of the standard tests, standardized tests that are linked to curriculum that are developed by world financial organizations like the OECD. That's what we have to do. In the second chapter, I have a link to a conference that the BCTF held about the OECD Education 2030, where they just lay it out. They just lay out how all this stuff is to prepare the global workforce, right? We can't just be nipping around the edges here like the IFT is. I'm sorry, Aaron. We got to say, get rid of these goddamn standardized tests, because we have to return control of curriculum to the people who are going to determine the future. And you know, the right wing is doing a better job at this than we are. You know that. You know that. That's what all this pushback about critical race theory is. They're saying they want to control curriculum. Well, we have to say we want to control curriculum, but we need a different kind of curriculum. We need an emancipatory curriculum for everybody. That's what we need, a curriculum of human liberation. That's what we need. And that, to me, is the job of our teachers' unions, is to fight for curriculum, that is truly emancipatory. And that means get rid of these goddamn standardized tests that are controlling everything about school. So that's it. That's the job I'm handing out for the committee, Aaron. That's your job. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about is something that Noe discussed, which was charter schools and vouchers and school funding. Yes, they are continuing apace with that, you know? And when there's money, they do it. When there's political control, they do it. Yes, they are continuing with that, and we have to fight it. But we also have to realize that's not where the big money is now. That's not where, that's the old money. And they're continuing with that, but they've moved into where the big money is. And the big money is on data. That's the big money. Money, money, money. That's what capitalism is about, right? So that's where the big money is now. And it is not coming from the places, from the banks where the old money was invested. It is coming from Silicon Valley and Wall Street. And I have a 2-click recommendation for everybody, right? Use littlesis.org. In fact, it would be great if people learned how to use it and add it to the database. And you see a project, the social justice group, or you see something, a report on learning loss, it's my 2-click rule, my 2-click policy. I go to Little Sis, I look at the about in the organization, right? I look who's there. I enter the name of the organization or one of the people who's on the board of the directors, click on Little Sis, and then I click on interlocks. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, it's going to lead you to the Hewlett-Packard Foundation, Chan Zuckerberg Foundation, Johns Hopkins, institute on X, Y, and Z that's pushing this learning loss stuff. It's the 2-click rule on Little Sis. It is so easy for us to find the sources of this funding and trace the networks, and we should be doing that. Okay, so what's the alternative? I really think we need to, the other thing I want to stress is this whole thing about counselors and social workers and nurses, and even naps in preschool. I want to talk about even all these good things that we want. The plan is to subvert all of those good things with data collection. So, okay, you'll be giving the kids naps, but you also have an assessment of your time about how long they slept. You think that's not in the works? Nina's laughing here. They have rubrics for play for recess. They have rubrics for recess. Why do they want rubrics for recess? They sell this data. It's control of kids. So there is nothing that we win that is beyond their grasp if we don't see the connections to profit and control. Profit and control. The unions cannot stop at just demanding more counselors. They can't stop at just demanding fewer police, because you know what? Those surveillance cameras can replace the police. And you know what? They can be more deadly. And this is something that I just found out yesterday in doing some research. I was talking before the session began about it's sort of like a doctor who's a researcher, and you're looking at the patient in agony, right? But you see the disease, and the disease is so compelling because it's new, and we don't really have we're not able to really understand it, right? So the research can become just, overwhelming. And Noah used the word excitement. It becomes overwhelming in its excitement because it's so new, So, I don't want us to engage in navel gazing, but what I do want to say is that something I just found out is that the federal government has put school security, it has these new school security regulations, and they are in the office CISA. CISA is the Division of Homeland Security, and they have a comprehensive school security guideline, right? And this is under the direction of Homeland Security. And the Biden appointee to head this agency came from cybersecurity at Morgan Stanley and is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. So that is how huge this project is that we are fighting. It's global. It's absolutely global because capitalism is a global social system. So what can unions do? Like, what can you do here? Like, here we are, 15 people, right? We're fighting capitalism globally. But you know, you already did something. CORE already did something. You already accomplished a lot. You woke up the labor movement in much of the world. You did. You were a beacon. Your strike was a beacon of inspiration and hope to unions all over the world, because we are in the belly of the beast, right? And resistance in the belly of the beast is felt throughout the entire system, And that is your power. That is our power, that we are in the belly of the beast. That's our power, and it's our responsibility. So I've been sort of noodling around with the guys, and I have to tell you, it is guys who are doing the research on this ed tech stuff. Most of them are in the rest of the Anglophone world. They're in Australia, they're in Canada, they're in the UK. They're not in the US. We have very few people in the US who are doing this work. But I had a private conversation, because that's really like the way I like to work. I had a private conversation with somebody, and I said, you know, what are we going to propose? There's this thing called the Futures Project, and I can put you in touch with the Futures Project, right? Your research department, your organizing department. I can put you in contact with the Futures Project. But I said, what are we going to demand? What's the solution to this software stuff? Because we can't, like, I don't want to go back to writing on the cave wall, for heaven's sakes, right? Technology is fabulous. That's why we're here. I love technology. The thing is, the unions have to develop their own software. The unions have to do it. You can't rely on the school district. The unions have to do it. That's what you should be looking at. The committee should not just be arguing about Skyline. You can't just be arguing about Skyline, right? The union has to work with other unions to develop, to put out bids, right? And to develop software that allow us to control, along with our allies, along with parents, allow us to control curriculum and teaching. That's the solution. Because if we don't do it, if we don't do that, and we don't start to think in those big terms now, we're going to be crushed. I have to tell you, that's the bottom line. We're going to be crushed. But I think we can do it. And I'm looking to CORE, and I'm looking to the CTU, because you have been the touchstone for struggle. So I'm looking to you to do this, right? And I'm not exaggerating when I say it's a world historic task, but you're up to it because you already made history. So with that, I want to close, and I want to say, as always, I am here to support you in any way I can, right? I'm not a CORE member. I'm not a CTU member. A researcher, an intellectual, writer, an activist. But I hope the book will be of use, of good use. Norma, it's great if chapter 1 is used in curriculum circles. Chapter 2 is going to be out March 11th, I hope. If I can stop myself from reading this new stuff that comes out every day, that just like blows my mind, you know, it's like, really, you know. So, it's going to be published on March 11th, and it is something that should be taken to other unions, because what I talk about in this chapter is how what is going on in education is a lens for what is happening to work in our society and what unions should be doing about it. So I'm trying to bring a bigger audience into these discussions of what we face, and that means other unions, as rotten as they are, and I'm going to say that. They're rotten. They're rotten. They're very disappointing. They're rotten. I'm going to tell you, they're rotten. That's part of the reason you're so good and you're so important. Is that the others, like, oh my God, you know, they're like not 10 years behind, they're 60 years behind. So
We haven't had that
on that note, I want to thank you for hosting me, and I want to tell you how terrific you are. And can I say solidarity and stay healthy.
Solidarity forever. Thank you so much, Lois. Honestly, I'm sure we're all thinking right now, just have a lot of thoughts in our head. Honestly, as soon as you said that with like unions having to create the software, I'm thinking about how we're going to lose so many teachers to those ed tech companies that are currently recruiting and offering much healthier work environments and salaries to match and all this. Or we could go in the other direction where we're utilizing our people's talents to build things that will work for us, right, by us.